Hey there, I'm Alvalyn Lundgren. I'm founder of Freelance Road Trip and also of Alvalyn Creative, which is my brand design consultancy. And I wanted to talk a bit about research, creativity, and critique. I get many questions from my students and sometimes pushback from my students regarding depth of research and breadth of research and how that plays into the creative process. And there's this idea that inspiration is just going to come and kind of hit you in the head. And the thing is that inspiration comes when you actually start working on something. So the idea of things coming out of the blue or coming out of nowhere and they serendipitously pop into your head and then you record them on paper or your device or whatever, that's actually not an accurate understanding. So the design process, whether you're an illustrator, designer, photographer, involves some preliminary work in the form of research and, first of all, understanding what the problem is that you have to solve or the purpose for which you are creating. A lot of times what I receive from students is that they can't be as creative as they want to be because they've got all these constraints. And the thing is that every design brief is going to have constraints. Whenever you're working with clients, and freelancers, freelance creatives work with clients. So whenever you're working with clients, you're going to have requirements. You're going to have non-negotiables. You're going to have a punch list, if you will, of deliverables. You are not free to do just anything you want. The constraints should be considered opportunities, not impediments, by the way. They're opportunities for your creative process to flow freely within those constraints. So think of it, if you've got water that's just kind of gushing, say, over a wall or something like that, it's flowing fairly slowly. It doesn't have a lot of impact. But if you funnel that water through a hose, the narrowness of that hose is going to create a lot of power. And it's going to have the water flowing through it when it comes out the other end is going to have a lot of impact. If you think about the difference between the circumference of a garden hose and the circumference of a pressure washer, the pressure washer circumference is quite a bit smaller because in adding more restraint, what's happening is that the water is being forced it's actually being propelled to a greater degree. One thing to think about is that you as a freelance creative, you as a designer, illustrator, copywriter, photographer, you're not fine artists if you're serving clients. Your clients are in business, they have needs. You are meeting those needs, you're solving those problems for them. We serve our clients by solving their problems, not through self-expression or random exploration. So within the constraints, explore far and wide and go deep, because if you just stop with one or two concepts and say, well, that's it, you haven't explored enough. You don't know if either of those two concepts are the best solution to that particular problem. And you won't know that until you get beyond a dozen or a couple dozen concepts. So research and explore, but research and explore with purpose. Because if you research and explore the wrong things, you're not going to solve the problem. The client's not going to be happy. Another thing that people often say is, well, I'm not a designer yet. I'm not an artist yet. And therefore, I'm not very good at this. And therefore, you can't expect me to work at a certain level. And that is true. However, with each project, with each assignment, with each new client, you should be leveling up. You should be leveling up your capability in skill, your capability in business, your capability in creativity, in actually being able to solve that problem and bring something into being that has not yet existed. No artist, no designer, no photographer, no copywriter, no illustrator arrives in the world fully accomplished. In fact, most of us start out creating crap. So we have to grow into, just as musicians and writers and dancers and athletes, we have to grow into the skill. We have to grow into the capability. So if you're kind of starting out, you're an emerging freelancer and you're not sure, or you think that you have to compete on a certain level, you do in a lot of ways. But at the same time, understand that you are not where you're going to be in 10 years. You're not where you are going to be in 12 months. No artist or designer becomes accomplished without working at becoming accomplished. You cannot be a master at what you do without making the effort, and making the effort over the long term. You're learning how to do business as a freelance creative. You're learning more about design. You're learning more about your practice. Everyone begins unskilled. You might have talent, but talent is only potential. It does not mean that one is fully capable. How does one become skilled? By making the effort over and over and over and over again. About research. Research is basically looking at what already exists and pulling from it, stealing, as Austin Kleon describes it, stealing and making it your own, not to infringe copyright by any means, but to take the inspiration from. And you never know when you're working on something where inspiration's going to show up. And all of a sudden, because you're working on this creative problem, you're going to recognize inspiration. You're going to see this over here and that over there. And all of a sudden, there is this spark of, oh, I never saw that before. One of the reasons we study the work of other artists and designers and illustrators, and we cross-pollinate into other design genres. I myself take a lot of inspiration from transportation and automotive design and architecture, but I'm a graphic designer. I'm an illustrator. So we cross-pollinate. We look at everything available to us for research. So the reason that we study the work of others is to better understand how design principles are applied, what's been successful in the past, what's been done in the past. We often draw from a historical point of view, and you can see that in trends year after year after year. But to understand how those design principles and elements were combined and work together to express an entire design is important for your own education as a creative. Or if you're a copywriter, it's important to understand other writing, to understand how to express ideas, and to borrow from various vernaculars to connect with certain audiences. So we never design in a vacuum. We never design out of nothing. We never design ex nihilo. In fact, it's impossible to create ex nihilo. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with clients is that they're not providing you with a design brief. You create the design brief based on conversations, which means you have to listen and you have to ask a lot of questions. I teach a brand strategy workshop and I talk a lot about Socratic questioning and digging for the information that you need to develop a strategy for branding and for marketing. But you get to create the design brief based on those conversations with your client. So part of your skill set has to be listening, has to be observing body language has to be hearing not just words, but tone of voice. Is the client excited about what they're talking about, or do they sound tired and frustrated? Are they getting angry? Is their body language indicating that they're not interested anymore? And once you have that design brief, which includes the definition of the problem or the purpose, the function of the thing that you're creating for your clients, then you have to keep referring back to that design brief to make sure you stay on track. Because it's very easy through exploration and research to get off track if you decide to go a different direction or if you are distracted by other directions. So you have to self-evaluate and self-critique within the design process. And at every stage, at every step, you have to edit and you have to make sure you are true to the purpose and function so that you will hit the target and not miss it. Even though you write your own design briefs for your client and the client will basically sign off on them as, they're known as proposals, it's a good idea to read through that design brief several times before beginning even your research. And if you understand the design process, your research, which we started out talking about, is something that you do at the beginning of the process and at various stages throughout, because it helps you keep things in check. So, although at Freelance Road Trip we talk mainly about the business of freelancing and building a business around your creative work, that creative work is as important as the business. The business supports your creative work. But you cannot allow the business concerns to overtake the creative work, how you serve clients, your creative process, your design process. And you cannot allow the creativity to overwhelm the business. There has to be a blending of both aspects. So I hope this was helpful. If you're not on my mailing list to get tips and industry insights in your inbox, go to freelanceroadtrip.com/newsletter and sign up. I'm Alvalyn Lundgren. Thanks for watching.